Hi, Recovery Girls. It's Lynn here. So glad you joined me today. Sometimes we talk about this idea of our lives becoming unmanageable. It's one of the very first things we realize when we enter recovery. And we talk a lot about the things that happened. If you're an alcoholic, you might talk about how you were stumbling drunk at a work party and how humiliating that was. If you're an overeater, you might talk about how you binged until you were so full and you just felt such shame. If you're codependent living in a toxic relationship, there are all sorts of things that can physically manifest around us that create chaos and drama. But we also have a disease or a malady of the mind and of the spirit. And so I want to talk a little bit about the mind first of all. When you get into recovery or prior to recovery, you may deal with a lot of obsessive thoughts. So for example, I was in a really toxic relationship and been in a couple. And in that relationship, I knew I needed to get away. And when I started to make healthy choices to step away from that relationship, I couldn't stop thinking about that person. There's a sense of adrenaline that would come when I was with that person. There was some fun to it, but there was also a lot of chaos. But the problem was my mind, I kept obsessing. I want to call this person, I want to call this person. And so one of the things that I learned was to find other people in recovery, safe people that you can call. And what happens is, say I'm thinking about calling the toxic person, and instead I pick up the phone and I call somebody in recovery and I tell them, I'm thinking about calling X. And a person will probably say, okay, why? Or talk me through it. And what that does is it totally interrupts the process of the obsessive thinking so that it starts to dissipate a little bit. The obsession becomes a little less obsessive. And I can then turn towards the right things to do instead of something that may be damaging. Same thing happens with alcoholics. You go to a restaurant, everybody's, especially early on, everybody around you is ordering a bottle or a glass of wine. You think, oh, it won't hurt, won't hurt, won't hurt. The best thing to do at that point would be to get up from the table, call somebody in recovery and say, listen, I'm at a restaurant, everybody's ordering wine. I really want a bottle or a glass or a bottle. And that person in recovery, hopefully somebody that's a little further down the road from you, can help you through that, interrupt those obsessive thoughts. And it's very powerful to have those interrupted, to know that you don't have to stay there, but you do need to take a step in the right direction, which in many cases would be calling another person in recovery. We also have a spiritual malady, and we get into that further down the steps a little bit, but I just really wanted to talk about the obsessive thought process and how strong that can be. I know it was for me. I had notes in my car as I would be driving that said, do the next right thing. I had phone numbers right at my fingertips so I could make those calls. If I couldn't reach anyone, I would often turn on, there's all sorts of recovery materials online that's not as helpful because you're still kind of trapped in your own thinking. It really takes turning. You're headed this way, you need to take that turn so you're turning right away, and preferably away completely the other direction, but something that's going to be healthy that will interrupt those obsessive thoughts, because those obsessive thoughts then turn into a really dark place of relapse if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict or a food addict, or if you're dealing with a toxic relationship, and codependency takes you back into relationships that are really unhealthy for you. So, my friends, I pray that you would decide to turn your life and your will over to the care of God and then watch for the miracles.